Hi, I'm Miranda Knowles here with Nikki Spiva tonight for the Atlanta Soul game hosting the Austin Torch. We're super excited to be here at Maynard Jackson High School here in Atlanta, Georgia. Coming up on a 7:15 p.m. first pull with a little bit of weather in the area, but it's looking to hold off hopefully for a wonderful game tonight between these two rivals. They've played once this season in Austin. The Torch got the better of the Soul that game. We're excited to see what happens here tonight. Nikki, anything that you're looking for in particular this game?
I'm curious to see how the Soul continues to grow their hex offense and see how that's implemented. That's something that we don't see as often in the club here in the U.S., so that's something that I'm excited to see how that's grown.
Yeah, for sure. Just for everyone to be on the same page about this, there are two traditional offenses that have been played for a long time. A vertical stack where you have all the cutters in the middle of the field with spaces on either side. You usually see the disc swinging back and forth and shooting downfield. You then have a horizontal offense with 3 handlers and 4 cutters, and you see passes going around, but there's under space and deep space. The Atlanta Soul is pioneering a more European or South American style of offense, which is called the hex offense. You have 2 backs, a mid, 2 wings, and 2 forwards in a more soccer style offense. And so that's something that even for people like me and Nikki who have been around the sport forever, we're super excited to see this new offense piloted here in our hometown.
Absolutely.
And how about the Torch? What are you expecting to see from them in this game tonight?
Just judging from some of the past games, their O-line seemed to do a really good job swinging the disc, especially kind of working good continuation mid-distance around backhands for break kind of goals around the end zone. So I'm curious to see if they continue to have that success against Atlanta's defense, which was some forced middle last time, and whether there's more pressure on that this time. So, yeah.
Right. Both of these teams are coming off of a loss. The Philadelphia Surge, a newer team in the PUL, was in Austin a couple of weeks ago. And while the game was close at the beginning, the Surge really pulled away from the Torch toward the end. And then the Soul was just in Nashville recently. And similarly, it was a close game. Nashville actually was up by 5 or so. The Soul made a final push, but it wasn't quite enough at the end. So I think both of these teams are really in this to win it. The Soul is searching for their first win of the season, and the Torch is actually still on the hunt for championship weekend. If they win this game and tomorrow in Nashville, they're on the front end of a doubleheader this weekend, then they are actually poised for a play-in game of the last game of the season when the Raleigh Radiants come to Austin to play into championship weekend. Raleigh Radiants has a really strong schedule, and so they're going to take a couple losses from DC. And I think if Torch win tonight, then they're setting themselves up for a really exciting final game of the season.
That would be quite a finish to have that very important regular season game on the calendar, and we'll see if the Atlanta Soul can put a squash to that tonight, or whether they get that opportunity.
Right. Before we get started, I would like to rep one of our sponsors, Discraft. The Discraft Ultra Star is the official disc of the Premier Ultimate League. Discraft, the world leader in disc sports. So yeah, the Atlanta Soul here tonight trying to quash the playoff dreams of the Austin Torch and simultaneously looking for their first win.
Looks like we're about set for that first pull in a minute or so.
Yep. So the Austin Torch are going to pull at the beginning of the first quarter. We play 4 12-minute quarters here in the Premier Ultimate League, and the Atlanta Soul are set to receive. You'll see, can't miss her. Quincy Booth, number 1 on the Atlanta Soul, this is her first game, and she will be a huge impact player, tall left-handed player, come up in Atlanta at Decatur High School, playing for the University of Georgia women's team, leading them to college nationals next weekend. And her teammate Fiona Cashin will be out here as well, probably on one of the Soul D-lines. Austin Torch getting set to pull here to get us started at this 7:15 p.m. start.
And here we are with the pull.
Ford fielding the pull, centering to Booth. Back to Ford. Back to Booth, up the line. To the sideline, centering to Vargas. Booth, an away pass, just can't quite hit Sam Lee.
Good movement, unlucky with the trailing edge there.
Right. So Torch D-line with number 7, Shira Liu, set to pick up. You see a traditional horizontal stack from Torch.
Got a sweep.
Working through Duffy. Back to Liu.
And a big shot.
Forehand. To number 19, Bacorn, who wasn't quite making that deep cut. She had aborted that cut and started to come under, so a little bit of a miscue for the Torch D-line offense. Ford out to Jarrell, Megan Jarrell, back to Ford, Vargas. Liv,
nice
Ford
grab.
making a nice second chance grab.
Oh.
Big forehand back to Jarrell, just shy of the end zone. To Lee.
Oh.
And Ford can't quite gather it up.
A really well-weighted forehand by Ford.
Yeah, Liv Ford is well known for her forehand hucks, and she really opens up the field for the Soul. The Hex offense tries to move through the middle a lot with small passes, but it's great when it opens up for Ford on her forehand. Center to Radicke. To Frankie. Leo up the line, looking for a forehand strike.
Oh, and that's going to work
This
out.
one connected to Bacorn. Almost in the end zone for Duffy.
And that's a break.
Finds the goal for the Austin Torch on this first pass to Maggie Rowell. So I think that's Duffy to Rowell with the first goal and first assist. Nikki, what did you see in that first point for the Atlanta Souls offense? Both times they had it. What do you think?
You know, saw some really good movement early on, just quickly pinging the disc around, got over towards the, trap side and then quickly moved it off. And, just a little unlucky with that put from Booth, but, no concern structurally. And then the second one, again, a great deep shot, just unable to convert at the end zone. And that was Ford with a shot, and then Ford also running in the end zone. I think ideally they'd probably want to score that in transition and not have her have to run both ways down the whole field.
Right, yeah. I think one thing with the Hex offense is that you don't have as many people downfield as you do in a horizontal offense especially, and so if you hit one of your forwards, it can take a long time for other people to catch up. So it's that balance of using the deep space and using the Hex offense that I think the Soul is still trying to figure out. Both of these teams talk about this being kind of a 2-year progression for them, and they're working on a lot of different strategic pieces that they hope to continue on into next season. Here, center to Greiner. Over to Jaski, to Harn in the middle. Back to Greiner.
With a shot.
Looking for a great shot to Morgan Lally. That is exactly how it's supposed to look, from what I understand.
Looked beautiful to me.
Yeah, you see them working from the backs to the mid, out to the side, getting Greiner in power position and setting it deep to Lally.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And she's one of the captains of this team, so it's great to see her come on after a break and secure that goal to kind of right the ship.
Exactly. So now the Soul will get their D-line on the field, and we'll get a first glimpse of the Torch offense. Now we expect to see the Torch play more of a standard horizontal set that flows into a vertical offense, near the end zone. The Torch, a very strong team with some very experienced players, including Jamie Estes, who's
2 on the line.
2 on the line right now, number 69 on the jersey. She played on the Atlanta Soul in some of the earlier seasons, 2018 and 2019, and will definitely make an impact today. Here we have Mia Greiner on the pole.
A good pull.
Stewart picking up, centering to Bjork. Back to Stewart. Torch in a horizontal set. Out to Ortiz.
Estes taken off deep.
To Bjork. Gilbert upfield to Cannon. Back to Gilbert. Centering to Bjork.
Jessup.
Out to Jessup. Estes. And out to Cannon, but can't quite reel it in.
Yeah, that around backhand just didn't quite bend back in.
Yeah, it was great space, but didn't quite get the angle of release to have it sit for the receiver before it sailed out of bounds. So we'll have Ford bringing it back into the field. When the disc goes out of bounds, you bring it to the closest place where it left the playing field proper, which does not include the end zone, so that's why Ford is taking it on that front of the end zone. Up to Greiner. Stoppage of play.
Maybe a marking foul.
Players talking about the play, figuring out what the call is. Greiner and Bjork discussing. You see there's a foul, no contest. They did not need to engage the observers on that call. Self-officiated, just the way we like it. Kingsley Hart up to
That's Annalise.
Paul. Up to sideline.
Oh.
Hikari cleans up the trash over to Kingsley Hart. Vargas makes a great adjustment.
Oh, no.
But her knee.
No contact, just looked like trying to stop to catch the disc behind her.
Right. Vargas trying to make a last-minute adjustment on a pass that's a little bit behind her. And playing on this turf, it can be really hard to make those last changes. We're hoping that this is not too serious, but Maria Vargas, very tough, amazing player, looks to be in some pain. The Atlanta Soul does have excellent trainers out here at every game, so immediate care being given to help Maria Vargas in this moment. We're going to take a quick break while Vargas, we're going to listen to one more Breakmark voiceover here. This live broadcast of the Premier Ultimate League is brought to you by Breakmark Ultimate Apparel. Go to breakmark.com to place your next custom order or check out the PUL Athlete Collab shops.
One thing that I feel like has come up in some other sports more recently and I've seen a couple people bring it up for Ultimate is kind of a push for grass fields. We've seen that I think in soccer and football, around athletes kind of advocating for more grass as a potentially safer surface, and you know some Ultimate folks pushing for that as well. The nice thing about turf is that if it's wet like it's been, it may be the better playing surface, from being able to stop. But that's just one thing I'm kind of curious to see if there's movement in Ultimate like we've seen in some other sports.
Yeah, I remember the national women's soccer team when the World Cup was in Canada and all the fields were turf. That was a big issue because the men's World Cup is not on turf, it's on grass. And that was part of the equity movement and the equal pay movement that we've seen in soccer. And yeah, I'd be interested too. I think grass, when it's well maintained, is a far superior surface to play any field sport on. But, you know, turf is much easier to maintain and easier to access in all weather. Vargas has made her way off of the field. We've got a sub coming in, Quincy Booth. If we recall, the Soul is on the counterattack. They started on D, and the Torch couldn't quite rein it in the end zone, and they're marching their way up the field. Quincy Booth will take over at midfield. To Hikari on the break side. In the middle to Kingsley Hart. Greiner looking for some quick disc movement. Instead opts for Liv Ford. Back to Greiner. To Booth, big yardage gainer. With a giant hammer over the top to Annalise Paul.
Perfect soft hammer way out to the break side.
Interesting because Quincy Booth is a left-handed player and throws this goal from what is certainly the right-handed hammer side, but still opts for that left-handed hammer so that she gets all that space over the top of athletes. Jamie Estes playing too far off this ball when a great thrower like Booth has the disc.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting, I'd be curious to hear what the Torch players think of it is, you know, when you're guarding into system, you're used to what the looks are, guarding it's a horizontal stack or vertical stack, and kind of the pacing and when your person is active versus Hex or guarding, you know, it's a new system to play defense against. So I wonder if that maybe helps the Atlanta team a little bit, just with, you know, you may be coming on stage when you're not expecting it as a defender in a different way.
Right, yeah, they have the advantage because the defenders aren't looking at them when they're trying to get open. All right, so we're actually back on serve here. Bjork, centered 2. Up the field to Quina, to Lochran, up to Wilson. Torch likely in their end zone set, back to Lochran. Through Wilson, switching the field to Easton. And Broom can't quite handle that. And again, the Torch get all the way into their end zone set and can't quite handle it. We'll be seeing the Soul go 70 here. Greiner up the field to Wilson. Kingsley Hart draws a lot of defense. Wilson needs to get out of trouble. And Greiner makes an excellent play, towing the line. And sends it to Kingsley Hart, who can't quite get there. Greiner made some amazing plays last weekend in Nashville, more on the receiving end, though she is a handler. The Soul really likes to see her get in the end zone as well. She's an awesome thrower, so she definitely has to do both for this team. That one couldn't quite stay in the reach of Kingsley Hart.
Looks like Austin's back in their host stack set after running kind of textbook side stack to start this point.
That's Wilson.
Pick called on the field.
Nikki, do you want to describe what a pick is for the listeners at home?
Yeah, so a pick is when a player on defense is running after the person they're guarding and someone is in their way and they're within 10 feet of the person they're guarding. So like you might see in basketball where picks are legal in part of the game and ultimate picks are not allowed. And when we're playing at a higher speed with cleats on grass, it's just it would be dangerous if that was the case. So on a pick play, the disc will go back.
Right. So it's an unfair defensive advantage, or an unfair offensive advantage. It goes back to the thrower. Torch unable to connect, so Soul will take possession around half field. Starting in a split sack for the first time tonight, there's Greiner, the reset to Wilson, up to Harn. Nice to have those left-handed players to get you off this trap sideline with the forehand. Harn through. Harn through Jaski to the far sideline. I believe a timeout was called by the Seoul sideline. It's another unique thing here in the PUL where you can call a timeout from the sideline. The coaches can actually call that timeout, and you can totally change up your line that's on the field, and you'll see the Seoul offense come out on the field after that. So it's a big advantage, a great opportunity for them to get what we call a break here, where you start pulling and end up scoring. But in this way, you get to put your O-line on the field to garner that break. We're going to get another look at the really great offensive footwork by Mia Greiner. This throw was a stall 9 put. You can see her eyeing the line, keeping her feet in bounds before she goes out. It's really good footwork. Not able to rein in that throw, but really a lovely reception by Mia Greiner. So you can see the Seoul starting in a split stack. They've got one person in the middle, 2 on either side, and 2 handlers back, and they'll flow into their hex offense from there.
That high release lefty looks unstoppable from here. Oh.
Beautiful throw by Liv Ford. Hikari not able to hold off the defender. So Torch. We'll start with Radicki here. Lovely active mark. Big fakes from Radicki. Through Frankie. Up to knees. Some give and go with Liu. Big forehand.
That's
to Bakhorn for the goal.
That's bookends for Bakhorn.
Yeah, Bakhorn had a big role in the Souls game against the Surge last week. And will definitely play a role here. She's a very strong defender and an awesome receiver with a lot of speed. Nikki, what do you think about calling that timeout here in hindsight by the Soul?
It's tough. They had a good look, shot on goal, and just couldn't quite box out that defender to complete it. But, you want to get value out of the timeout, so it feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity for the Soul for sure.
Yeah, certainly a letdown. Definitely would have been a great opportunity to go up 3. Instead, we're back tied at 2s with 2 minutes and 49 seconds here left in the first quarter. Seoul now set to receive with many of the same people out on the line that just came out after that timeout. Torch will pull. Also with many of the same people who came out after the timeout. That wasn't much time elapsed after the timeout. So here comes the pull. Ford centering to Booth. Right back to Ford. Torch coming out in a little bit of an inverted 3-person cup to bust up the pull play. Seoul doing well with this while the Torch fall into a person-to-person. Ford with another huge forehand. This time to Martha Wilbur, who makes the reception. Although she sure looks like she's limping. She tweaked her quad in warm-ups today. Martha, usually a very clean, beautiful runner, is limping into that catch. So great goal, 3-2 for the Soul. But you worry about them with these injuries to Vargas and, Wilbur with some pain in that quad.
Yeah, good job. Kind of on the backside of the disc coming in to make that grab at the end. So she's playing through it.
Yeah. And the Soul, you see, they kind of smoke out this defense. They do some little dinky passes until the Torch go person to person, and then they really open up on what's surely a mismatch. Wilbur on a much shorter Duffy, or Duffy on a much taller Wilbur, and that's a great matchup to put that into. All right, we've got 2 minutes and 4 seconds left in this first quarter. Torch set to receive. All right, pull is up. Bjork centering to Stewart.
Classic Fury pull play.
Estes. Back to Ortiz. Crossfield forehand. Over to Gilbert. Back to Ortiz. To Bjork.
Oh.
Up to Estes. Lovely offense.
Smooth.
Cannon into the end zone for Jessup. You know, the Atlanta Soul tends to play a very far off mark. They're pretty far away from the thrower when they're marking. And to me, it definitely is a change-up. It's something different. You know, we usually see markers with their face in the thrower's face, really pushing, verging on disc space violations. The Soul opting for a much further away mark. What do you think about that?
You know, I think you have more time to react to the thrower, but, you know, they can definitely get off to the races. There's not, I guess it's good in that you're not fouling or anything, but then also if you're kind of loose when they get cutter to cutter, we saw them just go, all the way to one side and then all the way back to the other side, which I actually couldn't even quite tell if it was FM or flick or backhand there.
And that is what Coach Walker said at the beginning of the game. They'd be looking for cutter-to-cutter motion. All right, enjoying the stream so far? Atlanta Soul's live streams are entirely self-produced. If you want to continue to see streams like this one online for free, donate using the Venmo or PayPal that are on the screen. Atlanta Soul offense, Booth centering to Ford. Over to Ortiz on the forehand sideline. Back through Ford. Torch again in their inverted cup. Ford opening up that forehand to Hikari again.
Nice.
This time received well. Close but not in the end zone. Through Booth to Wilson. Very nice clean offense from the Soul. I think they really took advantage of the Torch not quite being person to person. Ford really opening that forehand up. We've seen that quite a few times now.
Yeah, she's taking a lot of good shots, and it's great to see, the trust in a teammate, letting them make the play, and then the clean end zone hold. We've seen, them struggle a little bit earlier in the game with, that warning track completion of the end zone, and there it looked great.
That's right. Here you see Hikari making that excellent deep reception. She walks it back out of the end zone so that she doesn't throw it from the end zone, having not caught it there. Works it through Booth, calm and collected with the goal to Natalie Willie Wilson. Shaping up to be a very exciting game so far. This is exactly what I had hoped from this game. This has so much meaning for both of these teams. The Soul trying to get their first win, and the Torch trying to have that path for championship weekend. This is a great start, super close. The Soul with Griner's pull, ahead 4-3.
Griner playing back-to-back points.
Centering to Bjork. Up to Cannon. Bjork with a nice upline cut in power position. Doesn't see anything. Looks like perhaps a pick downfield or a travel.
Maybe
I
travel.
think Griner is calling a travel. In Ultimate, you're allowed to take a few steps after you catch, but you have to be slowing down and you can't change direction. So Griner took issue with that reception from Bjork. Here to Ortiz. Through Bjork. Back to Cannon. Up to Gilbert.
Nice inside.
Through Cannon again. You can see them getting a little bit more space coming to the middle of the field or even to the backhand side.
Good poach.
Bjork with the disc. Through Cannon. Up through Gilbert. Into their end zone set. Torch trying to work the disc around, but Griner's active mark really stifling that sideways motion, so they have to go back to the open side with Gilbert. Harn, big trapping mark. Griner trying to take the lane to get that handler D.
Oh, a hand block. Oh, with a foul call.
Yeah, so if the disc is still in the thrower's hand when the defender touches it, it's a foul. The disc is part of the thrower until it is released from their hand. So Griner may have touched the disc, but it was still in Bjork's hand.
Oh, miscommunication on the roll for an easy goal.
So Nikki, while we were watching that, you said a couple defensive terms there, and the Soul there, or the Torch there, plays out the end of the first quarter with that possession. Tell us what you mean by the roll there, and then I'll also ask you about the poach. So tell us about that.
So the roll is where, you know, if one handler is in the middle of the field and say passes it towards the sideline and then takes off for that upline cut, maybe has a step or has their defender beat, the roll refers to that person who's now on the mark dropping off the mark to take that upline cut away, and the person who was guarding the person who cut up line is actually now switching to go onto the mark. So it's a way to kind of contain that upline action, which we just saw the Torch score on. Looked like a miscommunication there where the player guarding the upline thought that the mark would drop and the mark stayed true, and then they left somebody open. But, you know, unfortunate finish to the point. I really liked the hard no around look. They started, you know, getting a little bit of pressure in that dump set. And they had wrinkles too. You know, we saw Griner kind of going no huck when in power position a couple times too. So it wasn't just, you know, no around the whole time, but dynamic marks from the Soul at that point.
For sure, yeah. I think that the Soul, while they are kind of on this multi-year trajectory with a lot of new players, a lot of young players, they have some real strengths. And I think that something that I've seen is their team defense. They're doing some really interesting things, especially around the mark sagging off, going hard no around. And I actually have seen them roll very well in previous games, and so I'm a little surprised that they weren't able to collect that roll. The Torch really was trying to get it back to the backhand side of the field, so they were doing a great job with the mark containing on the forehand side, and just one blown roll will get you in the end zone.
Yeah, margins are small.
They sure are. And when you say poach, that you were saying you liked the poach from the Atlanta Souls defense in the bigger part of the field. What does that mean?
So a poach is where, you know, a player will maybe sit in a throwing lane to deter the thrower from throwing to somebody else and kind of helping out a teammate. So there I saw one of the Soul defenders was guarding someone who cut through the lane but then was kind of moving out to an inactive place, and she stayed in that lane for a second when the Torch was really trying to work it over to this backhand side and just deterred one or two up and looks before recovering to their matchup.
Right. My friend and national team coach, compatriot Andy Loveseth, calls that 1.5 defense, 1v1.5, where you're not just guarding your player, you are guarding your player, but you also take away half of somebody else's player every once in a while. Keep your foot in the lane. You shut something else down while your person is not an option. And the Soul do that very, very well. So that's something we can keep looking at as we go through this game. It is all tied up at 4s here at the end of the first quarter, heading into the second. The Soul pulling to start the second quarter here. All right, would you make any adjustments here if you were either team's coach? I think
at this point,
I think I keep hucking.
I think the hucking's good. I think it hasn't been like huge strategy issues. I'd say it's a couple execution things for both teams, more than any kind of, you know, big change-ups.
Yeah, I think both teams, you're going to want to ramp up that defensive pressure at some point, and really take some blocks rather than allowing for the execution errors to continue, because they will eventually stop. But we'll see what happens. Estes here, back to Stewart, big fake.
Oh.
Almost a miscommunication, but Bjork hasn't quite gone up line. Lovely inside forehand to Estes. More big fakes. And
Jessup toes the line.
Great goal by Jessup. Torch really kind of had their way that point. Moved the disc up the field with some throw and goes, some bigger yardage gains. And then lovely around backhands to the break side to hit back into the inside for that goal.
And Bjork there got that disc across the field with that inside flick and then set up the finishing, which the previous point, Atlanta had kind of helped to prevent some of those, her looking for those throws. So, yeah, showing off some throwing prowess there.
Bjork is a really excellent player. I've enjoyed watching her play. She coaches the Austin Vengeance and is one of multiple Texas Melee alums. That's the UT Austin Women's Division team that has really been feeding the Austin Women's Division in club and pro for years and years and years. UT Austin, a great program. Back in my day, I played against Kara Crouch out of UT Austin. She is a
legend,
all-world team player, and her impact still being felt from the middle school to the college fields in Austin. Booth centering to Ford, back to Booth. Near side to Ortiz, in the mid to Martha Wilbur, to Booth, Hikari, Wilbur, Ortiz. See lots of quick disc movement by design in the Hex offense. Wilbur loses a bit of control of the disc. You know, it's not raining yet, but there is a storm coming, and the disc might be getting slippery just from the humidity. Counterattack for the Torch. We've got Liu looking for Radicki.
Good D.
Nice press cut. Wilbur able to guard that small space very nicely. Up through Bacorn. Denise. Back to Bacorn. Switching the field, back to Liu. Good reset D by Hikari. There's a call.
Timeout called.
Very nicely called timeout by the Austin Torch staff. Duffy had the disc and will retain possession for the Torch just maybe 10 yards outside their end zone. But the Torch will now be able to put their O-line on after this timeout. This could be a big momentum swing.
This would be big.
If the Torch break for their first D point out of the second quarter.
Yeah, I guess, just playing the numbers there a little bit with that, kind of trying to make Atlanta throw a lot of passes, and, they got lucky there with that, just unfortunate. Yeah, like you said, maybe a little humid. The air is certainly heavy out here.
This is great, though. You see the Soul, including Wilbur, who's, takes ownership over that turnover. They're all smiles. They're like, oh, man, that's not going to happen again. We've got no problem with that. This is a sign of a really mentally tough and good cultured team where there can be kind of a goober turnover there, and nobody has any problems with it. There's no yelling at each other. There's no self-deprecation.
Absolutely. I didn't see a single head hung at all, and then very quickly Wilbur was bodied up on that upline dump cut and denying. So yeah, it was great. They're not worried about it, that's for sure.
Yeah. All right. Torch's O-line out here against the athletic stalwart D-line for the Atlanta Soul. I believe that's Cannon with the disc. There's a call. Something around the mark, it seems. Either a travel on the offense or a foul on the defense. Hard to know. We'll look to Enzo Cianelli, seasoned observer and referee across many divisions. He'll show us the hand signals when he knows what's going on here. When you see two fists pumped together, that's the sign of a contest. Enzo telling us that it's coming in on 1 or 2, and play is live, cashing on that mark. Over here to Ortiz, back through Bjork. Beautiful mark, but completed to Stewart. Looks like some more action in the stack. You see the arms out, 90 degrees bent by the observer. That means it's a pick, which is a good sign for defense. When there's a pick, you think things are going well, right?
Yeah. Means the offense isn't, as clean as they want it to be, so you're getting some stoppages. You get a chance to look around, too.
And here in the PUL, actually, the clock does continue counting down during these discussions. So as with all Ultimate, we try to make the conversations as quick as possible so we get as much play time out of these 48 minutes as possible.
Oh.
Good pressure by Harn. And Amazing run-through block on the wrong side, unfortunately, to get the block by Wilson. Over here to Ortiz, but yet another pick. You can see they've swung the disc back and forth quite a few times without really getting a yardage-gaining pass. That's the sign of some really excellent downfield D by the Atlanta Soul cutter defenders.
Yeah.
Stewart with big fakes. Through Estes. Poor man's break cut. Kind of get the disc to the break side without actually making a hard pass. Cannon on the near side with Cashin actively marking.
Go Harn.
Harn guarding Stewart in the reset space. Throw and go. Back to Cannon.
Oh.
Greiner gets a piece of
Oh,
it.
wow.
And it goes out of bounds. Cannot be collected by the torch.
Call?
Perhaps an injury sub being taken by Jordan Harn. I didn't see what happened. I hope she's okay. She is walking off of her own volition. Wilbur comes in for her. And a D-line player comes in for the torch as well. One team takes an injury sub. The other team is allowed to match that. Enzo Cianelli mediating that restart to play. Greiner to pick up. Through Wilbur in the middle. To Cashin, her former UGA teammate. There's a nice big deep cut by Morgan Lally, but they opted for an underpass to Wilson that was a little bit behind her. Ortiz will initiate for the torch. Good mark by Lally, causing downfield receiver to toe it in. Back through the middle to Cannon. Far side to Estes. Marked by Wilson. Gilbert. Estes.
Oh, a great roll with the D.
Natalie Wilson takes the inside lane this time and gets that block. Greiner to Wilbur. To Abraham. The offside. Wilbur through Wilson. Back to Wilbur. Soul trying to make some deep cuts, but not able to unleash that big huck. Working through Lally here.
Gotta look.
To Greiner. Players getting a little bit fatigued here. Greiner up the line to Lally. Through Wilson. To Wilbur. Just a few yards from the end zone. Cashin with the disc. To Lally, who continues to work through fatigue. Wilbur making a strong upline cut. Here comes Abraham. Wonderful choice by Lally to switch the fields.
Oh, read the play.
Cannon read the play perfectly and comes flying through. Cashin now taking an injury sub.
This is a marathon point here.
After the timeout, this has been a few possessions. Here you get to see Cannon really jump that beautiful lane.
Oh, wow.
That's just what you were saying, Nikki, that, you know, Cannon was not guarding the intended receiver, but as her person cut somewhere else, she just chose to go in the new lane to get that D.
Yeah, you know.
This live broadcast is brought to you by the Premier Ultimate League. The PUL is a 501c6 nonprofit. This league has been community funded since day one, and we are so grateful for the support. We ask that you consider donating to help us continue to transform and fulfill our mission. Head to premierultimateleague.com to donate today. You know, Nikki, I'll be interested in this voiceover just now. We're talking about the beginning of the PUL, and you and I both remember the beginning of the PUL. It was kind of started here in Atlanta and arose from a protest, basically, of what was then an open but mostly men's ultimate professional league. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened back then?
Yeah, I remember it was at actually Turkey Tourney in Huntsville, Alabama. Had a team that that's a mixed club tournament where you bring 10 players right around Thanksgiving. A really fun local tournament, but some big names we had on that team. Jesse Schaffner, kind of legend of the game, played in the AUDL, the kind of open league at the time.
For the Nashville Night Watch. I
Mhm.
had to coach against her, which was fun and not so fun.
Hannah Leathers, also a UGA alum and, absolute stud on the field. And myself, Markham Schaffner, Elliot Erickson. But, I think we were just talking, and, what if, it's frustrating that, at the time there was a lot of investment in the men's side of the professional sport, but there were no similar professional opportunities for women players at the time.
And so much visibility and, money going into the men's side of things. And from my angle, I wanted to be a woman on that field, and so coached an AUDL then team. But many of the women players and allies like yourself said, hey, we don't want to do this.
Yeah. So kind of the demand was, we're going to, boycott and not participate in, play in, watch, support the, at the time, largely men's league until, equal representation at the professional level at the highest levels of the game is available for women players. And, a lot of other people were involved in that effort, from
beautiful goal by the Atlanta Soul, but looks like it might be called back for a stall. While they discuss, Nikki can talk about too that like after that boycott in Atlanta, we had Maddie Fry and many others, Leah Sinigini and Lily Ponitz, Devin, and many of the, and I'm trying to remember, Angela Lynn, who are now all owners, Devin Cox, of this Atlanta Soul team, that they actually were part of the creation of the Premier Ultimate League, which was really birthed from that boycott. So what all of us are watching here now is a result of that, and we're so happy that such a positive outcome came. I remember thinking at first, and here we get to see this lovely goal that wasn't quite a stall from Therese Dobler up the field to Gerald. Wonderful goal, so all tied up again. But I remember being so worried that there would just be a boycott and being against something. And instead, the people that boycotted were actually for something. And that something became the PUL that we still have today. Many teams around the country, from the Mississippi to the east, and then we also have the Western Ultimate League out on the West Coast. So it's really been a huge difference maker over these last 8-9 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been awesome to see all the effort and what has been put into existence by hard work of people in the community, building these teams, building these communities, and putting on these great events. And a lot of it is like local cities. It wasn't like a central league office. I feel like there was a year or two where it was just kind of there were teams before the league had officially come around. But anyhow, I won't take y'all down the memory lane too much more because we've got a great game.
The history, and I think it's important as we watch this to remember our foremothers, basically, who made this happen. Cannon over to Estes on the far sideline. Torch is O-line out there trying to get back 1 point ahead.
Oh, wow.
Wonderful run through D by Abraham, but there's some question from Jessup that there was too much contact involved. Some calls from the crowd encouraging the players to go to the observer. Hannah Abraham could decide that she really does believe that she got the disc before any contact was incurred. Instead, she opts to just play it as a foul contest and send it back to the thrower. Let's see what we think on this.
Oh, certainly close, but
only the players know.
Yeah.
And that's why we self-officiate, right? Back probably means that she felt there was some contact, but it's unclear whether it was before or after the play. Cashin really trying to put in work on that layout D-bid, but Torch maintained possession through Stewart. Up to Jessup, back to Stewart, and Jessup. Very good coverage downfield, speedy defense. Scuba over to Stewart, using the width to Estes. Back through Stewart, throw and go with Estes. Up to Cannon. Flare cut by Estes. Stewart looking for the reverse, but up to Cannon. Begging for someone to make a cut
Trap
from the back of the stack.
Oh.
Oh, and Abraham doesn't get an up call, and so Stewart gets that up line. It's so hard when you're playing such tight handler defense and you don't know when the throw is up. And so only one player on the Seoul sideline over here able to communicate that. Abraham doesn't quite get that up call.
Yeah, and it's getting pretty dark out here, Miranda. You know,
not because of the daylight. It's stormy, I think.
Yeah, it's a little bit of like stormy vibe right now. But man, it's a back and forth game. You saw the Seoul really amped up by that near D, really hunting some of those kind of unders. Yeah, we'll see if they can get a clean hold here.
Yeah, it would be nice for the Seoul to get that clean hold, to get their D-line right back out there. This is turning out to be an excellent game. 2 minutes left in the second quarter, basically on serve. It's hard when, you know, the possession changes after each quarter, but this is a super close game. Torch set to pull here. Leo on the pull. Seoul O-line to receive. We'll likely see more of that pass from Booth and Ford to start things off. And Hakari back there as well. Booth playing the mid position this time. Over to the wing with Ortiz.
Oh, picked off.
Slices it a bit too much, doesn't find its way to Booth. And Liu up to Bacorn. But Hakari with the better read makes a play up in the air. Those two have been battling this game.
Yeah, they've had maybe 3, 4 now. Great deep battles.
Yeah, Hakari, a transplant from Oregon, I believe, out to Emory University here, and has made a great impact on the Atlanta women's ultimate scene. Ford over to Lee, also an Emory alum. To Hakari, Booth, Hakari. Hakari stopped rotation on that disc before number 23 could get involved in that play. Ford over to Booth.
Oh, good find.
Cheeky outside in across field to Ford, back to Booth.
Give her that shot.
Backhand rip from that left-handed player, Booth.
Oh.
Right in stride to Ortiz, not quite in the end zone.
And they finish.
To Lee. Lovely use of space on this field. You know, lots of short field passes, using the width, and then really opening up the field with Booth's big backhand.
Yeah, Booth with the big swing, creative swing, good vision, saw the dump was under, decent pressure, stayed calm, found that good look, then ran across the field, got it, pumps, and then opens up the deep space. I mean, just a awesome sequence.
Right. And, you know, one of the tenets of this X offense is you're trying to pass and move, and you're trying to create triangles, much like in soccer. So you really see here Booth getting that triangular space, faking her forehand, and unleashing a backhand after Ortiz is streaking deep. I have to say this Seoul offense is looking much better than it has in the past couple of games. Here we've got 32 seconds left on the game clock, but I believe that is a lightning delay.
I want to give a quick shout out to Hakari. You know, I see her putting in the work at the Emory Lowers, kind of our local pickup field and stuff. She's getting sprints in, you know, regularly week in, week out. So awesome to see it, you know, pay off there with that big block.
Yeah, Hakari is a great player. So glad to have her in Atlanta. Enjoying the stream so far? If you support the visibility of women and gender-expansive players in professional ultimate, we would appreciate your donation. Donate using the Venmo or PayPal that are on the screen. And we are now in what I believe is a 30-minute lightning delay, so we're going to take a break and return when we can.
See y'all in a bit, hopefully.
All right, we are back, or at least 5 minutes from being back here in Atlanta, Georgia, a city which does get periodic thunderstorms in the summer, which this must mean it's summer.
Yep.
Because we're getting that thunderstorm in the evening coming across from Alabama over the north of Georgia, which is where we are. We are going to get back going in about 5 minutes. The Torch from Austin are here visiting the Atlanta Soul. It is tied 6-all in the second quarter with 32 seconds left. At 9:20 p.m., we will have that pull that, potentially could be the last pull of this second quarter. Have that pull go up at 9:20, finish the second quarter, and pretty much go right into the third and fourth quarters without a halftime. It is raining here.
It's wet.
It is wet.
It's wet.
Only the Atlanta faithful remain to watch the conclusion of this one after a flash thunderstorm, which included a bunch of lightning. So for player safety and safety of all the crowd and crew, we took shelter in our cars for a few minutes, and we are back out now after the lightning has passed, but not the rain. Nikki, what do you think is going to be a difference coming out in the rain for these athletes after a relatively still first half?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Both teams have taken shots deep. Can they still, execute those throws with the disc being wet? We'll see who packed their gloves and who's got the grip to get them through these last couple quarters. But that I'm curious to see how that will play out. Just the deep game, it's an important part on this field, and both teams have done well with it. So it's going to be a little harder.
I did notice Elise Bjork does wear a throwing glove.
Okay.
She is the center handler for the Austin Torch. So
that primary dump defender, you got to cover the up line. That's kind of your job. And you know, if you get beat there, it's hard. People are really good at upline cutting these days with multiple angles. But you know, I guess that's the risk that you take, right?
That's right. Yeah, you either defend that cone with the mark or with everybody downfield. Here we go, Hikari and Ford playing a little catch. Pass and move. I like the clearing. Ford gets off the sideline to receive it back in the middle. Hikari asking for that deep look, and she gets it from Sam Lee. Pass and move with Ortiz. Back to Ford. Count perhaps getting a little high. Ford almost threw that one to Cashin on the cone. Instead elects for a big looper to Martha Wilbur.
Great find.
Ford is such a creative thrower, especially with her forehands, and Torch forcing backhand there really opens her up to be able to not huck it with a forehand, but to break the mark, which once you get to the end zone, that's even more powerful. Really nice rip by Soju Hikari, too. It looked like, I wonder if the Soul took that. Like, let's at least get the disc downfield before we turn it over, take our shots that way. Here you see Ford's lovely pass getting all the way over, not just the defenders, but to the fading back shoulder of Martha Wilbur, where only she can catch it.
Yeah, execution is really high right now. You know, I remember I said kind of like, we'll see how it goes, you know, with the rain and stuff, but so far the hucks look crisp.
For sure. Torch pulling up 9-7. If I'm coaching, this might be a zone point here. Make them at least not huck it right back down your throats. Maybe even a transition zone or something. We'll see what Soul brings.
Do you have a favorite zone, Miranda?
I love all my zones equally.
Okay.
You cannot choose a favorite child or zone. All right, centering to Bjork by the Austin Torch. Looks like a forced forehand from the Soul. Jessup back through Stewart.
Ooh. Huh.
Estes puts a little too much on it for Cannon.
Atlanta coach a little bit kind of close to the line there, you know.
Jenny Gold making an impact with her words and perhaps her positioning. Griner to pick up. Let's see if they send it downfield for a big one again. To the middle with Lynn. To Ford. Back to Lynn. Lots of pass and move. Ortiz or Griner. Pick called downfield. And the clock ticks down in favor of the Atlanta Soul.
We'll see how they do here down on that kind of trap side. You know, with when Booth came on out of that timeout, you know, she was able to stretch the field with that huck look, you know. But I think one thing that's kind of an open question is how do they swing, you know, these D lines? Can they swing the disc all the way to the far side and maybe get an advantage there?
Right.
We'll see if they need to do it and if they can.
And I think a question for me still learning this Hex offense is like, do they want to swing it?
Yeah.
I think in soccer, you know, if I think back to soccer, you know, you do often switch the fields back through your defensive backs or even your keeper. So I think probably that is still part of the plan, but they may also look to attack in those triangles from over there. So they may look to find, for example, Abraham in this mid position as well.
Yeah, maybe it's just kind of the little half swing, and then you can go back, but that's fine.
Yeah. A stall 9 pass from Lynn finds a receiver, but is not able to continue it.
Do we have
Looks
a stall
like
call?
Call back on the pass, 2 passes away.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay.
Looks like they're making the signal for an uncontested foul, which, if that is the case, it should have been a play on. So Lynn completed a pass to Annalise Paul, and then Paul threw a turnover, but the continuation goes from the original thrower through the completion of that pass, which was successful. So I think the conversation may be, where does this go now? Should play have stopped? Should it go back to the original thrower? the receiver, or should it be a turnover?
That I don't know, and that's why I'm glad we've got Enzo out there ready
Yeah.
to, figure out this stuff.
Timeout was actually called.
Okay.
I think he's motioning that it was Austin Torch timeout. Is that the second Torch timeout of this third quarter? Because I think, Seoul is a Seoul timeout. Because the Torch did score a timeout to convert their O point. It sounds like perhaps the Seoul staff, Maddie Fry perhaps, one of their O-line coaches, called a timeout before the turnover occurred.
Felt that high stall coming, decided, I don't feel great about this situation, decided to bail him out.
Yeah, I love that. That was actually one of my favorite things coaching in professional ultimate is knowing your players well enough that you know when they're going to turn it over and calling the timeout before they can do it. You have to balance that with the potential for calling a timeout while your player's throwing a goal, which no one has ever been more upset at their coach that when they call a timeout.
Coach, come on!
While you're throwing a goal. It's brutal. But that was what apparently a very, very good timeout. Even though the high stall pass was completed, the next one wasn't because and it wears on
the energy.
Yeah, the high stall. Even if you complete that pass, you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're locking us up on D. We can't do anything. Let's do something crazy. So the coach really settles that down. Booth to Ford. Torch, not in person to person.
Yeah.
Hikari to the middle with Gerald. Ortiz, Ford. Lots of quick passes.
No need to force anything here if you're Atlanta, right? You have the lead.
Wilson to Ford. Puts up a big forehand.
Oh.
And Greiner makes an amazing
Wow.
second effort catch. Amazing.
Tumbles to the ground and we hope elation.
Yeah. And that's a big break for Atlanta. They're now up 3. 10 serving 7. Seoul up on Torch, which would by all counts be a huge upset.
Yeah.
Ford with a multitude of assists tonight. See Greiner getting a huge hug from Coach Maddie Fry. Makes it seem like a really good timeout call when that happens.
Yeah. And I mean, that the disc is maybe a little wet, and right, so staying focused for those second chance opportunities when it just slips off a little bit. I feel like we've seen Greiner make a couple plays tonight where, she's staying with the disc and locked in this game, and it's just awesome to see.
Yeah, Greiner, an absolute gamer, somebody that, Maddie Fry, who coaches the Seoul, coached against while she was in college at UCF. Great program down in Central Florida. Came up to finish her college career at Kennesaw State, and we're so glad Mia Greiner is here in Atlanta.
We see a rolling pull. Make sure that disc touches some wet turf, perhaps.
You bet. Amy Broom, nice big wide pass. Torch's second O-line out here. Loughran back to the middle for Easton, who is particularly strong at quick disc movement.
Yeah, she's fast.
Yeah, super fast. Bjork getting the disc over to the sideline and getting it back, but cannot get that gloved hand around it. So Seoul will take over just outside their defensive end zone.
Is it me or has Liv been playing every other point, point out here?
Yeah, Liv is both very fit and is someone with strong throws who will not be as affected by the wet weather. Kingsley Hart back to Cashin. Up to Lally. Gerald. Nice yardage gainer to Cashin. Cashin getting to match up on Bjork, the other team's center handler, who now has to chase Cashin around. Ooh. Little blade hammerish thing.
Oh.
And Lally manages to find Gerald.
For a second, I thought that was for Cashin, and I got a little nervous, but she saw who she wanted, I
Well,
think.
we may never know who the intended receiver was, but regardless, that is an Atlanta Soul goal.
Absolutely.
And they're
strong
up
side
4.
ultimate right there.
That's right.
Goal scored by number 5, Megan Gerald.
It's very nice. I think, you know, in this offense that they've clearly been practicing,
By number 26,
they just
Morgan
hit the first
Lacey.
open person.
Yeah.
And you can use fun little passes, whether there's a little overhead component to that pass or it's a little bladey. You have to go over the defenders rather than go around them. I think it's a great thing to train your athletes to hit that first open person wherever they are. Seoul counterattack doing a really great job going the full length of the field to get that break. All right, 3 minutes and 34 seconds left in the third quarter. Seoul is on quite a tear. Austin has not scored this half.
Wow.
9 minutes scoreless for the Austin Torch. Not something we anticipated seeing for a team that won this game the last time these two teams matched up. Is it zone time yet, Nikki?
I mean, didn't we just see a zone?
That's true. That's true.
But is it zone time for Atlanta?
For the Seoul.
I don't know. They're getting breaks. I don't know. You know, it's like, do you change what's working? Do you, when do you throw the change up? You know,
That is the question. That is indeed the question.
you don't want the team to settle in, but they certainly haven't figured it out yet.
Right. And I mean, if you're going to score goals, you better keep scoring them. I mean, I think, will Austin score 11 or 12 total goals? I'm not sure.
This is a different look from Austin.
Stewart rips an opening pass to Estes,
Whew,
who
that's a quick one.
immediately hits number 23 in the end zone.
Interesting thing, that point, and I saw it an earlier point this half too, a little change up in how they're playing those dumps off the pull play. Playing very tight behind the disc as opposed to junking those lanes, which they were doing a lot more of earlier.
Reinforcement dog trainer specializing in building strong bonds.
Enjoying the stream so far. Atlanta Soul is a
It's me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
That's me. Oh, that's it. Okay. Sorry, my mistake. We're good. Y'all go.
Enjoying the stream so far. Atlanta Soul is a majority women-owned and majority people of color-owned small business, and they produce these streams entirely in-house. Donate to support their work using the Venmo or PayPal that will surely soon be on the screen. It's been a bit chaotic here with the rain delay and staffing here, and we are all here volunteering in this amazing organization. We'll get that back up on the screen for you.
Saw the little pull kick there to start, a couple little yards there.
Yep.
Oh, wow,
Ford
good
sneaks
hands.
that pass into Wilson, up to Ortiz, to Booth, who always has a calming presence, especially here close to the end zone.
Call.
Pick is called. Potentially some frustration here among the Torch players, who I think, again, are just really wanting to win this game. Atlanta trying to drag it out a little bit. The clock is ticking down.
Yeah.
Some conversation. I think this is probably about Willie Wilson running her player through the thrower and the mark. And there is likely a pick called on that. If you can't follow in the line with your offensive player without running into someone, it is a pick, even if that player is on your own team or is the thrower or the mark. So we're back here with Booth throwing and going.
Wow.
With Wilbur up the line.
Yeah. Put her in the truth booth there.
That's right. Yeah. Martha
that's hard to
Wilbur
guard.
played with Quincy Booth for a bit at UGA. That is a dynamic duo.
By number 42, Martha
It's
Wilbur.
pretty exciting here for Atlanta fans. The faithful are still out here on the sideline cheering along. It has stopped raining, and it's actually a gorgeous night here in Atlanta, especially when your team's up by 4 in the third.
Oh, yeah.
Super interesting. Quincy Booth and Fiona Cashin both are headed towards college nationals next weekend for the University of Georgia Athena team. And, it's such a tough call about, do you play in a game like this so close to your culminating competition for your college team. Seems like it's working out so far.
Yeah, it looks so far so good. I remember a week or two ago, one of my chain teammates, Adam Miller, was playing in a men's pro game and got just absolutely trucked by a guy from New York. And I was really worried for him because he also has college nationals coming up. But luckily he's okay. So hopefully we can get all these college kids off to nationals at full strength.
Yeah. The UGA programs are doing particularly well recently. We're so proud, especially of Athena, who has made an impact over, multiple decades on Atlanta Women's Ultimate. National champions in the early 2000s.
Oh, close.
And Cannon here cannot quite get to that one. Beautiful layout bid, but the Soul back here on the counterattack. Likely will take their time. 1:20 left in the third quarter. Greiner to Harn. Back to Greiner up the line. 2.
At what point,
Paul.
Miranda, do you start to play possess the ball here? How many seconds left do you feel like you start to go, we want to be the one, a minute, 30 seconds? Where's your kind of feel for that?
Well, I think it depends how good your possession is. The Soul, with their offense, where they often have multiple people back in the backward space, they might actually be very well suited to playing possession
A little frustration
offense.
from the handler here. Motioning vigorously at her players to clear space, get some new cuts in.
Right. Harn finds Kingsley Hart with 30 seconds. Back to Harn. Up to Wilson, who puts up a deep one to Greiner.
And she's got it. Oh, with the big kick spike.
Yeah, the only thing you would have liked better is to get 17 more seconds off the clock.
Yeah.
And I think that is your question. I think, Soul is up 5, but the Torch is going to have a chance to lessen that gap before going into the fourth quarter. And so if you're nitpicking, which I do, then you would have wanted to possess this a little bit. On the other hand, a goal is always a good thing. So this Wilson to Greiner, that looks nice to me.
Yeah, that's her spot this half. She's come up with big plays over there.
Yeah, I think, the possession piece comes in maybe more when it's a 1 or a 2 point game and in the fourth quarter where you'd have the buzzer beater. I have coached in pro games where teams have possessed the disc for 2.5 or 3 minutes, where they're just using the whole field. And man, as an opposing coach, is that frustrating.
Yeah.
And even if you do turn it over, if you're up 2 at that point, it's not really a big deal. So we'll talk that strategy in another quarter, but for now, the Torch are receiving with 13 seconds left before the horn blows and possession finishes. Here's Broom with what we often call the Fury play over to Easton.
Oh.
Now, I think
Unlucky
time
bobble.
had expired before that drop occurred, though I did not hear a horn. The observers are probably on this. If time had expired, then the quarter is over and the players will leave the field. If time had not yet expired by the time that disc hit the ground, then the Soul would actually have one more possession for their counterattack. And I am not totally sure how we're going to see this unless we do an instant replay of this turnover. We might actually be able to discern the truth. We're working on seeing if we can get this replay. I'm not sure we'll be able to see the clock run down as it goes. Since we won't be able to see the clock run down alongside with the turnover.
Either way, Soul probably happy now, right? They played good defense, and now that goal that they scored left some time on the clock. Didn't come back, didn't come back to bite them. So that's kind of a win for this. I mean, it's been a huge quarter for Atlanta.
Oh my gosh! I mean, they scored to make it 8 at the end of the second quarter. So it's been a 5-1 quarter.
Whew.
And you remember at the end, there were only 6-7 goals in the first half. So the Soul has gone on a rampage after the rain came.
Do you think there's a certain Atlanta ultimate, vibe around a rain and lightning delay and then coming back out of it? Are Atlanta teams better at that than maybe other teams just because they have to do it more?
We do have to do it quite often, and Nikki may be referencing a particularly strong regional final that our beloved team, Chain Lightning, excelled at after a lightning delay. I think, anything that you do a lot is practice.
Yeah.
And so if you practice a thing, you're likely to be better at performing it than teams that are not practicing that thing. Now, if we were in 105-degree heat and humidity, the Austin Torch would be having that 5-1 quarter.
Yeah.
But as it is, you may be very right that, we are accustomed to this sort of delay and wet disc while it's still hot and humid. This perhaps is an Atlanta thing, or from here on will be.
I hope so.
All right, we are back, getting ready for the fourth quarter of a fascinating game between the home team, the Atlanta Soul, and the visitors from Austin, the Torch, who have to go tomorrow to play in Nashville against the Nightshade. They are on the front end of a doubleheader, and what has become a much later night. This could be the start of kind of a disastrous weekend for the Torch.
Yeah, it's a tough weekend to go play two teams who, you're pretty closely matched with in their home turfs, and to have to deal with rain, just logistically. I wonder, do they drive? I don't know. I guess you plan to drive tomorrow probably, in the morning, but it just adds a layer. You're up later, you're kind of going back to back, and, these teams have something to prove being on home turf, so just tough.
Yeah. Pro Ultimate, where you are, trying to conserve your owner's money and you need to play some doubleheaders. It is so challenging because, the Torch are traveling with 19 rostered players. They don't have extra players to, sub in for the game tomorrow. So these 19 are going to play another long, hard-fought game tomorrow while the Soul rests and the Nightshade are watching this one. It's a very tough aspect of the schedule, especially for teams coming from longer distances where they have to play those doubleheaders.
Nice pull just in bounds.
All right. Broom out to Stewart. Soul in a zone. Looks like three-person cup of some sort. Torch with a slightly different O-line than we've seen. Broom.
Oh,
cross
dangerous.
Field. Griner going for a block.
Okay, everybody's okay.
Stewart not excited about getting that much contact on an easily caught pass.
Those are the ones that kind of scare me when you're coming in hot and there's a chance, to collide with the leg there, but really glad looks like everybody's okay.
Yeah, Stewart is a strong player and can withstand contact, but also shouldn't have to. So I think that's probably what the conversation is. Just making sure there was no call on that. Here you can see Broom's high release pass. And Griner doesn't quite see, and you see the almost taking out the legs. That's the very dangerous part of that play.
I see what she saw as tantalizing, close, but yeah.
Yeah, that's where you might go with the left hand instead of the right so that you don't induce that contact.
Yeah.
All right, we're back here. Stewart now has Griner on her. I feel like she might be out for justice a little bit. Torch swinging the disc around through Wilson, up to Gilbert, back to Wilson, pick downfield. Again, the clock does not stop during these conversations. So you know, this is actually precious time for the Torch to be losing. Pick again downfield on the same possession.
These Atlanta marks are doing a lot of work. I mean, that's one of the things that, you know, feel like great players always preach is you don't rest on the mark, and they are working hard to contain these Torch throwers and keep them on, you know, whatever side they're trying to force to.
Yeah, I had a teammate who used to say you expend 90% of your effort on the mark defensively, 10% in the downfield space, and if you're smart and old like we are, we can just use our positioning and our minds to take that space away and use all that you've got on the mark because it has the biggest chance to impact the outcome of the play.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this stoppage is really taken. Oh, it looks like they have stopped the clock.
Yeah, they do eventually
Okay.
stop the clock if there's too much conversation. So there's some sort of contest. Missed the first hand signal.
It looks like the pick signal is what I think I'm
Yeah,
seeing.
but usually picks are not contested, so I'm a little bit confused
might be
about what we're
multiple.
seeing. Yeah. And I think they're working out where the stall is going to come in. We have 10 seconds for each thrower. It's going to come in on stall 6. So just 4 seconds of D for the Soul. And instead they get it to Stewart, marked by Quincy Booth. Upfield, quick passes through Gilbert, back to Broom. And around backhand.
Oh, nice. I think just towed the
Called
line, I
out
thought.
by the
Oh,
observer.
wow. I don't know. That was pretty close.
That was quite close. Hard to see from here.
Yeah.
But regardless, Booth has the disc. Soul's going the other way. Quincy Booth on the move.
Got a shot here.
The big cross
Oh,
backhand.
just perfect.
Dropped into Lally's breadbasket. Up to Griner, who's pointing, please go to the backhand side. There's Booth again. Up to Lally.
She makes it look easy.
This break train continues to roll.
Wow.
It is 14-8, having been 8-7. Soul.
Goal scored by number 26, Morgan Laley. Assisted by number 1, Quincy Booth.
Yeah, and this is so hard too. I mean, the Torch, not only do they only have 19 players total, you know, you do tend to have an O and a D line. I think you were saying there's an O, D, and swing line that the Torch has. Do you want to explain that?
That's what they were running, at least at, I think, the last game they had against Philadelphia is a 3-line system where they had an O-line that played offense primarily, a D-line that played defense primarily, and then they had a swing line that would come in, you know, alternating with defense, and then if the O-line got broken, the swing line would come on. The lines look a little bit different tonight to me with, you know, I think Claire Stewart, I think, was on the swing line for that Philly game and now looks to be a little bit more integrated into the O-line. So I'm not exactly sure with the road trip if maybe the lines are a little bit different this weekend.
Yeah, there are larger roster limits in the PUL than in other professional leagues, and so you can have more people, but both teams tonight only have 19. Usually the home team has more. But, you know, they've been broken 4 times now in a row, and you just got to send people out there that are going to complete passes at this point. Duffy to pick up for the Torch. Swinging it around to Bjork. Up to Jessup.
Atlanta with that zone look again.
Yeah. Over the top to Estes. On the run to Jessup. Across.
Oh.
Lovely bid, but is tailing away from her with that outside in angle. Duffy can't quite make the catch, so Atlanta counterattack. Back at it with 8:33 to go. Soju Hikari. Upfield to Cashin, to Gerald. Wilson make a nice cross cut, drawing tons of defense. Back to Hikari. Cashin. Gerald. There's a pick. That'll send the disc back.
The level of throwing compared to just when I was growing up 10 years ago, even, you know, is just such
Let's be
higher.
honest, it was more than 10 years ago
Yeah.
you were growing up, Nikki.
But just thinking about, I mean, players now at such a young age just being comfortable at such a higher level than back in the day. And it just makes for a really exciting game.
That's right. This has been an extremely high skill game. And, most of these players, at least for the Atlanta Soul and many for the Torch, did not play on these teams last year. They're young, they're college players, but they still have a lot of experience and skill, many hours banked. And so you get these really nice games with relatively unknown players, those who we are getting to know and will become stars in a few years. It's a very exciting time to be part of the Ultimate Frisbee community, I'll say that.
And I'll say, the end zone offense feels like it's been huge for both teams. Who's able to convert at that end zone? That's where we've seen some of these systems break down a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see teams being able to use both sides of a vertical stack in the end zone in a way that, like, skill throwers were not able to do, a decade or so ago. The game is really opening up, especially in the women's division. Lally with the disc. Back to Abraham, but a pick downfield. Again, you think of a pick as a sign of good defense, but this Hex offense is sort of convoluted, and there's lots of cuts going to smaller spaces. But in a timed game, it is detrimental to the defense, I think, to have clock be ticking down. It looks like Gerald, across the mark, backhand up the line. I believe that's to Jaski. No, Abraham. Hannah Abraham with the goal.
Assist comes from number 5, Megan Gerald.
And this game may be out of reach for the Austin Torch. What do you think, Nikki? 7 minutes.
Unless we see something, pretty different in this, these closing minutes, it's going to be tough for them. They're almost doubled up at this point, so. I wonder if we see a couple more kind of set plays, trying to spring someone deep for those quick goals, because they have shown the ability to score quickly when they execute on those early. But I don't know if we're going to find those options with the zone look that Atlanta's playing. So
that's right. I mean, you might just you definitely have to score your O point quickly if possible, but you also have to average 1 point per minute over these last 7 minutes without getting scored on at all.
Yeah.
So you have to find a defense that causes the other team to throw something unwise and quickly. So that's super tough.
If I'm the Torch, I'm just saying, let's not even worry about the clock yet. We've just got to get back in control of our game and just show that we can just execute down the field, because it's largely, recently it's been more execution errors, right? That was a open, look, good swing. They had good over the top to bust through the zone, and just, the throw was just a little bit off and didn't quite work out for them. But if they can clean those up, they could have a chance maybe to crawl back.
Yeah. Soul, I like this call to run their zone. This is an inverted 3-person cup in the middle and a 3-person cup on the side. So you got, the sides of a cup-shaped 3-person formation marking when the disc is on the sideline, and the middle marks when the disc is in the middle of the field. They've now transitioned out to person, and that is often the time to strike deep.
Oh.
Nice reception.
Good high point there.
By number 23, I believe. All right, so they're back on the board.
Yeah.
They have scored in the fourth quarter.
And fairly quick. And was that Bacorn there kind of with the box out on the backside?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
She's a good deep receiver and a very strong defender. I'm excited to see where she goes.
We always say it just starts with one. So, it's been a minute since the Atlanta offense has been out here. We'll see how they look, but they've looked pretty polished so far this half.
True. And in that string of breaks that Atlanta had, they were playing everybody. It wasn't like they were sitting their O-line. You saw Booth and Hikari and Wilson out there, or Wilbur out there a few times. And I think now you're kind of just playing everybody, which is going to feel like a really great team win for the Soul when this is all said and done. All right, Torch coming in. On defense, Hikari to Booth, back to Hikari.
Quick
Opens
shot.
one up for Wilbur, whose quad is certainly bothering her. You can see the limp in the end of her run, but she's staying on the field.
I would shut it down.
I know. I mean, up 6 with 5.5 minutes left. I'm not seeing the need for Wilbur to risk injuring it more. But perhaps if the trainer has said that that's unlikely to happen, she's given it a shot. All right, Torch counterattack here. Frankie up the field to Duffy. Back to Frankie. To Wilson. Broom. Easton makes a great deep cut. Broom doesn't hit the first look and tries to maybe sort of force it after the cut has expired. And so the Soul will have it back. 5 minutes left. Greiner taking her sweet time walking this one up.
It's like a Jokic move, you know, I feel
Yep.
like. And, you know, no rush to get that ball in play.
That is no rush. Lots of good cuts downfield. Greiner breaks the mark to Wilbur. Big windup to Booth, who you have to respect deep because of the height, but really is more dangerous coming under. Overcooks the look to Greiner. He's going to set this active mark on Broom again. You see the Torch marks seem very much closer than they have been in previous games. That may be an adjustment that they've made. Broom breaks that one back to the middle to Wilson. Nice sliding grab by Easton. They put up a great look.
Wow.
Immediately
That's a great
upfield
throw.
to Kinsey and Ease. All right, Torch is trying to punch back. They are certainly in a hole, but they are not giving up. Super respectable. 4 minutes on the clock.
Kinsey Nees is the only current college player on the Austin Torch.
That's great.
Very
That's
different team composition than the Atlanta Soul.
Yeah, and she's at, she plays at Trinity and is the only current college player. I think that's, yeah, it's so interesting. Like Atlanta feels like it's very much rebuilding. COVID killed sports and women in sports in particular, and it's just been really, really hard bouncing back from that. I see that in the high school games that I coach. We have very few schools with girls teams, and so the people who stuck through it are left, and then kind of the next round of folks, the Quincy's and Fionas and Soju's and Livs, who are coming up but didn't play really before the pandemic. And, you know, the Torch, on the other hand, seems like it's more seasoned, people who have played more. Though they also, their coaches were also talking to me about community building as being a big goal for them this season. The club scene in Austin has taken a bit of a backslide for women's ultimate. And so the Torch is really the central focus of women in ultimate in Austin.
Is Showdown still?
I think they still exist,
Okay.
but they have not been strong recently.
Okay.
And other teams have kind of eclipsed them in that region.
Do we have
This-
a reverse brick here or something?
Yeah, this to me looks like a time penalty, something that was assessed in between points. That the Soul will take the disc 10 yards back into their own end zone. Liv Ford starting with the disc. Oh, and the disc slips right out of her hands.
Wow.
That's that
This
slippery
is the type
forehand.
of thing that you worry about. It looks pretty jumbled.
There's a pick. Liu with the disc. Nice reset back to Bjork. Bounces it back to Liu. Wilson does a good job getting in there in the mix. And I think Ortiz called a pick on Liu. Kind of running the defender off of the thrower there. There's some conversation as the clock ticks. Liu out to Bjork in the end zone. So that was a really devastating penalty that the Soul incurred. I think probably because they weren't on the line in time to signal readiness for the PUL. But, you know, 4 points all
From
of a sudden.
15-8 to 15-11. I mean, this.
This is now close.
Yeah.
All right, we're back. 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter in this game. 3 minutes and 8 seconds left, even though the counter is a little different on your screen. The torch will be pulling. Looks like one of the teams took a timeout. I'm not sure which team took a timeout there during the break. The torch getting water to their teammates on the field, and the Soul huddling up at center field, wanting to make sure that the Soul finishes out these last few minutes. And, you know, it is something like that can turn on a dime, right?
Yeah.
You drop a pull, you have an early, you know, short field turnover, and they convert quickly. Things can happen.
Yeah, would have been nice without the pick call, though, right? I mean, what could have been a 10-second, goal ended up being about a minute.
That's right. It all matters. It's one of those things that you wonder if the evolution is to stop the clock when a call is made.
Yeah,
It's hard without whistles, and so maybe you give the observers whistles once they hear the call being made that stops the clock. That could really take away the impact that a proper conversation has on the clock.
Yeah, you don't want those things to be at odds.
Exactly. You want to have that spirit of the game that it governs all the ultimate we appreciate so much, but you don't want it to be at, the detriment of the defense. Wilbur centering to Booth. Wilbur starting in the back position, perhaps because her leg is bothering her. Pick, which I think, if you're the Austin coach, you may ask your team to stop calling picks because the time is just too precious.
Yeah.
Ortiz.
Oh.
High stall. Finds Gerald. Over to Sam Lee.
Good dump defense.
Yeah, high pressure. That's Abraham.
Oh.
And that I actually like. High stall, send it as far as you can downfield. Clock ticks, and they have to go 60, 70 yards.
Yeah, we call that a body blow.
That's right.
Oh.
Torch, to their credit, lots of great defensive pressure.
Looks like it may have gone out a little bit further up the field, though.
Okay. Griner to set this big aggressive mark. Forcing backhand, trapping that sideline. Liu with the disc.
Timeout
looks like
called.
a good timeout. Stall was getting high. I understand that call for sure. Unfortunate because Ortiz is getting the disc in power position, but if you have a timeout right now, you got to take that for sure. Convert this quickly. Maybe you draw something up. What would be a play that would get you a quick goal from where this is, the 55-yard line?
I think about maybe some type of sweep or fake sweep out of their horizontal offense where you're kind of sending one or two players across and under and then sending somebody deep so you get that deep look down this side, and if they choose to poach the lane, you try to hit somebody in the middle and then go down the far side. But
right. All right, Austin Torch back with the disc. They are indeed set up in their horizontal stack. We'll see if two of the players close to the disc sweep away and engage the third.
Yeah.
They just run the
Jessup
standard
with
diamond pattern. Stewart to Bjork.
Booth lurking in the deep space.
To Cannon. Up to Jessup. To Bjork. Estes. Collision in the middle, but they play on. Ortiz. Well towed in by Cannon, who's having a wonderful game. Inside backhand that can't quite be handled by Gilbert. I think she's calling a foul, saying that the defensive pressure impacted her ability to keep her feet under her. Wonder if we could see this one on a replay, see what we see. Gilbert and Ortiz having a conversation. Hard to see from that angle. It doesn't look like Ortiz was particularly close to that play, but hard to know. Gilbert certainly thinks so. They're talking it through with the observer, Enzo Cianelli. The way this goes is that both players talk to each other first and see if they can come to an agreement, either to agree with the original call, which was a foul, or to agree that it should be contested and sent back. And then if one really feels strongly, they can go to the observer who chooses to make the call. And it looks like they have gone to Enzo, who has ruled it a foul. So Gilbert will tap it in. That means everyone can move, and she will walk it out of the end zone, and the count begins now.
Quick goal.
Goal to Cannon, who really, Cannon is someone that I did not know about previous to tonight, and she is having a wonderful game. I really enjoyed watching her quick motion downfield and great possession of the disc when she's got it. Any other players that you've been particularly impressed by on either team tonight?
I don't think we've been able to see quite as much of it the second half, but I thought Clara Stewart was playing great at the end zone for the Torch, especially in the first half. Just part of that swinging engine that looked really hard to slow down.
Yeah, she's played on national U24 team. She was on the mixed U24 team that won gold this past summer, and just seems like someone that I would love to be teammates with, that you just trust implicitly, especially around the end zone, like you said, possessing that disc quite nicely. Well, maybe after this point we can talk about who the player of the game might be. But, you know, this is a 3-point game, maybe not without reach, but the Torch are going to have to really put something special together here to come back. Roller pull that doesn't quite roll out the side, does get wet, but Booth and Hikari have no problem with that. Dinking and dunking back and forth to each other, but Hikari sends it over the head of the intended receiver and out of bounds. Broom picks up
You got to
and
shoot
sends
here.
it to the end zone.
Oh,
Where it is received,
wow.
though it does appear that Hikari and a player on the Torch, or 15 Elise Frankie, caught it at the same time. I wonder if we could see that again on a replay. See what we think here. It's up, and we can see there's Frankie goes up. That sure does look very
pretty
close.
simultaneous.
And the thing is, if two people catch it at the same time and it's a tie, then it does go to offense, which in this case would result in a goal for the Austin Torch. So really, the Soul are kind of opening the door for the Torch either way. It is indeed ruled a goal.
I mean, a 2-point game with 1 minute.
My
That's
goodness.
doable.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh,
What a game of runs. Because it was 15-8.
yeah.
So they've gone, you know, the Soul went on a huge run, and the Torch has then gone on a 5-point run, and we still have a minute to play. You know, the Soul, like you said, should be thinking about possession.
I mean,
but
there they kind of seemed like they weren't trying to take any shots. It was just that high swing.
Yeah,
You have to
miscue.
execute the basics.
Right. No matter what strategy you choose, you have to throw and catch, and that is what is going to, that's what it's going to come down to out here tonight. I think it's also a bit mental. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you can feel them coming back, and they are hot, and they've got some, you know, very seasoned veterans like Amy Broom knows to put that disc in the end zone right away. This is a really, really interesting mental toughness exercise for the Atlanta Soul to hold off the Torch as they try to come storming back into this game at the end.
Yeah, I don't want to curse the Soul or anything, but if I'm them, I want to have Liv Ford back, you know, starting that disc out. She's been such a rock for them, along with Booth, you know. Just possess, you know, take your looks. You don't have to do anything wild, you know. Advance the ball where it's there, but, you know, take a breath as a team and collect yourselves.
Yeah, I do think that if I were coaching either of these teams, when they get on offense, I would take a big, nice breath together.
Yeah.
Try to clear my mind, get my sympathetic nervous system out of the game, and simmer down. Ford to Booth. Exactly like you called it. Up to Wilson. Ford. Booth. 50 seconds. Booth drying her hands off, finding Lally. Also very sure-handed to Hikari in the mid. Oh, tight defense on the resets. 35 seconds. If the Torch has a timeout, this might be the time to do it.
Just
throw it to
here.
the end zone. Duffy sends it. Valiant effort from the receivers, but it tails off. That should be the game.
Ooh, that's got to be a sigh of relief from the Atlanta Soul.
Yeah, I mean, it still would have just been a 1-point game, but that is certainly the kicker. Booth will walk this disc up, and time will expire. And this will be the first victory of the season for the Atlanta Soul.
Ooh, there it is. That's the final whistle.
What an amazing game for the Atlanta Soul. We had a little bit of everything in this game. Some beautiful weather, lightning delay, totally different second half than first half. It was super close, just neck and neck in the first half. And then the Soul burst ahead, and the Torch couldn't quite catch up with their own run.
Yeah, great fight from both teams.
Any players of the game that you want to highlight?
Ooh, Griner had some very timely, huge plays.
As always.
She would be up there in my book. But, you know, those hooks from Booth were and upline cuts also unstoppable. It's tough to choose just one player. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think, you know, the biggest difference that we see on the roster from the first game between these two teams is the addition of Quincy Booth, Soju Hikari, and Fiona Cashin. And all three of those players made huge impacts, especially on the offensive side, just gaining tons of yardage, playing this Hex offense quite beautifully. I think we are just about done here from Atlanta, Georgia tonight, from Maynard Jackson High School, home of the Atlanta Soul, with a big win in this game. This live broadcast is brought to you by the Premier Ultimate League. The PUL is a 501c6 nonprofit. This league has been community funded since day one, and we are so grateful for the support. We ask that you consider donating to help us continue to transform and fulfill our mission. Head to premierultimateleague.com to donate today. And if you enjoyed the stream, remember to donate to support Atlanta Soul's work using the Venmo or PayPal that are on the screen. For Nikki Spiva, I am Miranda Knowles, and this is the first home Soul win of the season. We are so excited for our team, and we'll see you next time when we host the DC Shadow. Yeah, of course. See you, Daniel. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow.